Hi to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Pierre for the introduction and thank all the attendants as well. To the inISBSG for giving me this opportunity. So let's get to the point. So the target of this presentation is to show you how our company, it's called Leda, faced the challenge of providing an effort and cost estimation for a plus 20 million euro software development. And okay, so first slide says the POSIM people. This is obviously a made-up word that I heard in a TV show, in a sitcom, because it was part of one sketch. To be honest, it was the first thing that came to my mind when we decided to accept this challenge. The meaning of POSIM people could be where the possible and the impossible meet. Further on the presentation, you will probably understand why this challenge was kind of POSIM people, where the possible and the impossible meet. Okay. So then please allow me to put you in the picture. So we had this one insurance company that was undertaking a digital transformation initiative, and as a part of it, huge software development had to be done. And for this development, the proposal of 2 IT vendors were finally selected with the RFPs. And after a couple of months, the leader of this transformation initiative contacted us. He wanted to know if we could somehow validate the cost and the effort estimations that both IT vendors had presented in their respective RFPs. So we said, of course, that's one of the things we do. We will do it. And once this objective was clear, and then it came the catch, or let's say, came the challenge. So, as I learned before, I'm going to use an iceberg analogy, but not in the same manner. So you can see at the top in the target, the client wanted from us some kind of number or figure to be compared with the vendor's estimations, with the 2 bidding IT providers. So first of all, as you can see in the center of the iceberg, it was roughly 20 million euro worth of effort for the program core of this initiative. And for those who are not familiar with this, it's a huge software development, which means lots of functionality to be developed and lots of functionality to be estimated. Well, more details that we had for this job. On the right-hand side, you can see some sharks swimming by, representing the risks associated to this job. The first one was that we had a very, very tight deadline to perform this estimation. Another point was that there was a lot of documentation to be reviewed that the vendors had already produced. Third thing that happened was that we had limited client support, which means that had very limited time for clarifications coming from the client that had the proper input. Plus, they did not disclose any information about the vendor's estimates at all. So we were blind on this regard. And on the left-hand side, sorry, there's a 4-point here, and our estimation had to be not only one figure, but had to be broken down into the different releases that were identified. There were 5 releases, the life cycle phases of each release. So on the left-hand side, the net with the fish, there were another goals that our client wanted to achieve. First of all, we wanted to validate if a blind estimation from our side would be in the ballpark. That's why they did not give us much information about the estimates of the other vendors. And also they wanted to understand how the process of estimation worked. What's the rationale behind it. They also wanted to know if they were paying a fair price for the development market-wise. They wanted to compare this estimation given by the providers, the two providers, with the market. And finally, they wanted to evaluate the automated estimation tool that we have developed in Leda. This tool is called Quanta. And they actually wanted a real life case, not just a demo. So many risks threatening, not only one goal, but different targets or goals to achieve. So in order to reinforce the idea that the challenge was possible, you can see here the deadline that we had was, the job had to be done in roughly 10 days. We're including actually weekends. So it was quite manic. It was difficult, but not impossible. So let's go to the job. So we put together a team of 4 volunteers, brave volunteers that had to accomplish this job. We call them the A-team for obvious reasons. Sorry for this other TV show reference here. So the job. Now that the conditions for the job are clear, I'll try to describe the steps to get the job done. For each step, we had to find the right balance between actions to be taken and the assumptions supporting those actions. So I'll go step by step now. First step, you can see, was identifying the scope. On top is the action, and below it is the assumption. So first of all, identifying the scope. As I said, there were lots of documentation, and we had to identify the documentation with a high level detail. The assumption here was that the documentation had to be generic but complete. Obviously, we could not go through all the documentation available because there was lots of documents, low level detail, and so on. And there was no physical time due to the tight deadline. So we used this documentation to identify the functionality to be developed. It was defined as high-level user requirements. After having identified this scope, we performed a functional size estimation in function points, and the assumptions that we had to take in this case were related to the functional complexity or the functional types that we use, even the degree of reusability. So the action was performing the functional size estimation in function points. We had to take some assumptions in terms of complexity and other things. Once the functional size related to that scope was measured or estimated in this case, we have to convert the functional size from function points into effort, in this case into development effort. How do we do that? It works like a conversion factor. So a conversion factor of 1 would be that one function point could be converted in 1 man-day of effort. If the conversion factor or efficiency value was 0.5, that would be the one function point will be done or produced in 2 man-days, and so on. How could we decide which reference efficiency value to use? Using the sample of projects for the insurance market. We use as well some percentiles. So we got the scope. Based on that scope, we perform the functional size estimation in function points. Then we translate it into effort, in this case development effort. And another requirement was the estimation of test effort. So part of it was calculated automatically by the tool, and another part was done by expertise. We will see a little bit more of that later on. And the development effort was calculated. The effort for the rest of activities was calculated as a percentage of the development effort. So let's say if we assume that we got 60% of development effort from the total of a project, and we have a distribution of 60% for development, 20% for test, 10% for deployment, and 10% for project management, we could have the distribution based on that 60%. And then following these steps, we could get a final figure using just one value for the efficiency value, but we're going to go further. So just given the uncertainty of this situation, instead of one figure, we get the matrix of results depending on the variability of a couple of key factors. That would be the scope that we identified and the efficiency value that obviously could not be the average of the market. And any partial hits in this estimation could be considered by us as a success due to the uncertainty that was surrounding us in this job. So all these steps could have been done not using an estimation tool, but since this wasn't user requirement to use an estimation tool, because it made the task much easier. All the input from these steps were inserted in the tool, and it produced the result automatically. So the insight on this quantum thing, this tool, this automated estimation tool, had basically two advantages. On one hand, with the proper analysis, a configuration can be done to get the results with the desired aggregation levels. One of the requirements was to give the estimation broken down into the effort of the release and the different project life cycle phases. So we could do that on the tool. And then there's a clone element feature. Okay, it comes very handy to clone functional elements that are alike. And on the other hand, the other advantage would be that over 1,700 functional elements were identified and over 8,700 function points were produced. So using the tool, that was much easier to handle instead of using Excel worksheets and so on. So this is related to the tool. So how did we get to choose the market value for the efficiency value and the project life cycle phases distribution? I mean, the efficiency value would be the conversion factor to go from function points to effort, and the project life cycle phases to get the whole effort of a release based on the effort of just one phase, that would be development. So we used a benchmarking database. This is a database with the detailed data of thousands of projects developed all around the world, as you can see. The projects in this database have different characteristics. The activities in those projects usually have the end-to-end effort distributed in the project lifecycle phases, different industry sector for each project. They had as well technology and framework associated to each project. So once you get all this information, the database, the benchmarking database repository that we had, or that we use, had over 6,000 projects, around 3 million function points, 52 million number of hours per person effort, cost of around 2 billion euro. So we had to narrow down the sample of projects. So we selected the projects that matched actually the one that we were working on. So we followed a very straightforward logic. First of all, we selected the working industry, that was insurance. In this case, the technology, that was Java and JavaScript with Angular and Spring Boot frameworks. And finally, the type and size of the projects, or the developments in those projects. We chose projects that were new developments and small and medium-sized developments were dismissed. So once we get all these projects that match these criteria, with the sample that we got, the average market values for efficiency value. For this case, build an unit test, and we could calculate the effort of the end-to-end development of each release using the distribution as the sample would give us. So these values were inserted as well in the tool as part of the configuration. The development efficiency value and the project lifecycle phases distribution. Okay. A little bit more about the test. The user requirements for test effort included these 5 types of test to be included in the estimation. The first 2 were integrated and user acceptance test, then regression test, load, and performance test. So the integration test and the user acceptance test were calculated automatically by the tool that uses the functional size and some corrective values, and we could get the effort and the number of use cases based on the number of function points that we calculated. That came very handy. And the other activities were regression, load, and performance test. We estimated them in an old-fashioned way, which is the requirement analysis, customization based on the client's requirements, and finally, the calculation based on expertise. So after all these steps, we finally got a result, which was almost 180,000 hours per person. For those that are not familiar with estimations, effort in hours per person, see it like this. If you can, as you can see, if 1 dot is 1 month, on the right-hand side, you can see 10 boxes with 100 dots each one. That would mean over 1,000 months. In years' time, this is over 83 years for a person to develop that. So with a 20 people team, that would be over 40 years. That's why it was a very, very huge development. But not only that, we wanted to complement this figure, giving an effort estimation matrix, as I mentioned before. And here you can see the estimation matrix. On the left, you can see, you can picture us blindfolded, trying to get a result as accurate as we could, but giving just one figure was a bit risky. So instead of that, we gave this range of values that depend on the uncertainty of these two main factors. So on the vertical axis, well, first of all, in the center, you can see the 179,000 hours. On the vertical axis, we could see how the functional size would affect this estimation. If we were spot on with the scope, this is the functional size, we would move sideways because we would know that we are right in the center for functional size. That would say that we are moving sideways in the center row. On the other hand, we have the horizontal axis. That's the percentile 50 that represents the efficiency value of the market. So for efficiency value that is right in the percentile 50 of the sample, and the functional size was accurate, we would have an estimation of 179,000 hours of effort. But a lower value going to the left would mean that the vendor would be less competitive than the average on the market. And if we go on the other way, the opposite way, that would mean the opposite, that we were more competitive. So because this matrix presents a fairly big range of estimations, we narrow it down to the values that are on the shadow box, which goes from 250 to 121. That's not too bad, considering the situation and the uncertainty that we had to face. Well, this was the main part of the job that we did, this estimation. Along with this, we actually produced a report where we included detailed considerations about the scope, the documentation that we had selected, the functional size, how did we identify the functionalities, and so on. Another point on the report would talk about the productivity or efficiency value that we decided to use, the market reference for the project life cycle distribution. We explained to the client what it meant. The third point we included was the activities including the estimate by release and the project life cycle phase in each distribution in each release. Included as well the effort estimation matrix, not just one value, but the effort estimation matrix, and then the estimation tool report, because the tool produces as well a report, but once the configuration is done, you only get, let's say, one number. If you tweak or change the configuration, you will get a different estimation, obviously, and the more information that you get, the more accurate the result is. And finally, very important, the assumptions. We wanted to highlight that the more information that we had, the more accurate the estimation would be. As I said before, we're completely blindfolded, and all the assumptions had to be very well documented. So if we had more inputs, the estimate would have been more accurate. And after the report, presented the results. We had feedback, good feedback from the client. The client was quite happy with our work. Actually, we are collaborating now with them. So I guess we did a good job. And they acknowledged the extra value provided in terms of comparison with the market. So it was giving them leverage to be used in negotiation with the vendors. Otherwise, they would have no leverage to negotiate with them. Just to finish the presentation, for a job of estimation with these characteristics, I would say that we need to focus on the following. First of all, the scope. I would say try to invest time on identifying the scope properly. Obviously, this is key for an accurate functional size estimation, and it doesn't really make sense to have a part of development very well identified and having part of it not estimated at all. Second point would be that always taking into account the client needs. This looks pretty straightforward, but not always we keep our ears open to hear what the client is asking us to achieve. Third point would be to cope with uncertainty, with ranges of values. So, I mean, not giving just one result, but giving ranges of values, of estimations, and identifying the factors that could make that estimation go in one way or another. And finally, always document all the results, explain these results, all the assumptions always need to be very well explained to the client. And finally, if you have the chance to use an automated tool, then use it, because it's going to make your life much easier. And I think this is all. I think I'm on time as well. So thank you very much to everyone. And if you've got any questions.
Thank you, Manuel. Gracias.
Okay.
I think we have some questions,
Yep.
Tom.
Absolutely. Why don't we start with, did you discuss with the customer about what is the resizing strategy considering the amount of uncertainty involved?
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
Yes, the question is, did you discuss with the customer the resizing strategy considering the amount of uncertainty involved?
Well, we actually warned them and told them, look, the more information that you give me, the better the estimation would be. But they had this goal that was not so clear for us. But later on we found out, it's just they did not know what we were doing, the magic behind it. So we said, give me more information and the estimate would be more accurate. And they said, no, I want you to be completely blindfolded, just to be sure. In this case, if we need to understand how this thing works, and they were not that worried about the final accuracy, but they wanted the accuracy of the result that they wanted to know.
Super. One more question. How was the tender specified regarding pricing? If PUG wasn't the productivity rate imposed by the client to the RFO?
No, there was no information about productivity whatsoever. It was a normal proposal, and they actually did not know whether the estimation of the vendors were very high or very low. If it's very low compared with the number that we gave them, it could be a strategy from the vendor to, get the the proposal, and then look,
Mhm.
I'm going to need another year, and then the cost, build up. Or the way could be, look, they are selling, it's an insurance company. They don't know anything about development or software development, and let's ask them for the double of it should be. That's why they needed us to give them some support in this regard. And all these considerations were actually included in the report as well.
Super. Pierre, those are the questions we had.
Okay, thank you.